Hello, everyone, and welcome to this demonstration of Metasys Release 9.0. We're very excited to present this to you today, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. My name is Jane Wemsley, and I'm a Product Marketing Manager here at Johnson Controls, responsible for our Building Automation System portfolio, and we're broadcasting to you today live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Today's agenda is really simple. We're going to spend just a few minutes talking through the new features and enhancements that are included in the Metasys 9.0 release and how we got there, our journey to Metasys 9.0, as well as provide a quick overview of the philosophy behind the design of the Metasys user interface. Then we'll spend the rest of today's session doing a live demonstration of the Metasys 9.0 software. We have reserved about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of today's session for questions and answers, but we encourage you to submit your questions via the chat or the Q&A panel at any point during today's presentation, and we'll do our best to answer those questions at the end of the session. Also, a recording of today's session will be made available to you shortly after the live event, so you're more than welcome to share that with any of your colleagues who may not have been able to join us today. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Ryan Piaskowski. Ryan is a Metasys product manager here at Johnson Controls, and he's responsible for managing the product lifecycle of the Metasys user interface, graphics, and reporting. Ryan has over 10 years of experience in the controls industry and has held roles in software engineering and operations. He has a Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering from the Milwaukee School of Engineering. So with that, Ryan, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time out of your day to walk through Metasys and what's new here. About 4 to 5 years ago, we sent teams of researchers out to customer sites to really try to gain an understanding from a user's standpoint of what are the things that users are requiring, what do they need, how easy is it to use the software. And we sat down in front of our site management portal interface, which is pictured above, and we conducted the research globally. We found a few things globally. The first is that the site management portal interface, which was our engineering workstation and operator interface, classically for this generation of Metasys, we found that it was really hard to learn. It required a lot of time to understand what equipment serving what area of the building, to navigate. And the interesting thing also that we found is that it was very powerful for those users that were very familiar with it. The other thing we heard specifically from our customer IT departments is that it required software to be installed on your laptop or desktop, and users were asking for more mobility types of features so that they could diagnose and correct, restore order within the building automation system in the facility on the go. So about 3 years ago now, we released our first version of the Metasys user interface. It's pictured on the bottom right. The Metasys user interface, it's a web-based interface. It's integrated, I guess, within the Metasys server and works in conjunction with the site management portal. Metasys user interface initially was really focused around daily operations of the facility, but since then we've added a whole bunch of good stuff into that interface that make it even more powerful. At the same time we wanted to come out with a new interface, we changed how data was organized within the building automation system. We started organizing data around the physicality of the environment. So which physical part of that enterprise or campus or site, what building, what floor, what room. In this case, what VAV box or mechanical systems are serving which rooms or which areas of the building, which lighting zones or which fire access control points or anything like that are integrated into that kind of space, right? So we have a VAV box here. We have a lighting system serving room A in this case. You also have mechanical system relationships, so which air handlers serving what VAV box and furthermore central plant. So equipment and space type of relationships. Those get built off of what we call the building network, or for those of you that are familiar with Metasys, the all items tree. And this is basically or how data gets from the end equipment controller up through some kind of a communication trunk to a supervisory controller to the ADS server. The industry today largely builds their building automation system interfaces around the building network, and they use features like graphics or user views extensively to try to make sense of that building network. But there's some key problems to user experience with graphics, for instance, and I'll cover those when we get into the demo. But I want you to pay a close attention at how our graphics capabilities are augmented by this space and equipment-based framework. So a few things that I want to cover today. Definitely want to touch on our core framework, our space and equipment-based framework, our mobility aspects of the interface that we released from the ground up. But I also want to cover some of the items that we've just added into the Metasys 9.0 release. Reporting through our advanced search feature, our building network feature that we're going to go through, which is basically the all items tree, again, for those of you that are familiar with the site management portal interface. Custom behaviors feature that really takes our graphics capabilities to the next level, as well as trending enhancements that we'll walk through to make trending and reporting even that much more simple and better and easy to use. The other thing that I want to briefly touch on as a part of the Metasys 9 umbrella is our BACnet IP field controllers that we released. That includes a general purpose controller as well as a VAV controller. So better bandwidth, better performance on those controllers, and really enabling you to kind of future-proof your investments into the building automation system. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to the demo site. So I've opened up my favorite web browser, Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Edge. I'm on a desktop computer, but I could be logging in on a tablet, an Apple iPad or iPhone. You use your standard Metasys credentials. If you do have like an Active Directory authentication, you would put in your domain credentials here, just as you would do today. So I'm going to go ahead and log into the site. And when I'm first brought into the Metasys user interface, on the left side, you'll notice our spaces navigation. So right now, I'm at the campus level. Now, this is a medical facility, but what I'd like to point out is that the graphics are the first thing that loads on the screen. So you get a full screen view of everything on that particular graphic. So if there's energy meters at that particular location, or there's other critical system information like central plants or critical air handling units, that's what you'd get at that level of the facility. I am experiencing some internet connectivity issues here, so bear with me for a second. It is our proxy server that we have here at Johnson Controls that's causing the issue, I believe. Okay, so again, at this level, you're going to see roll-ups of data, key critical system information. Roll-ups of the floor, so if anything is in alarm on that floor, any piece of equipment or zone is too hot or too cold, you'd see that at a really quick glance. If I page over, at this same campus level, I have what we call the spaces dashboard. In this case, you'll see equipment serving space, potential problem areas, and equipment summary. But I want you to kind of pay attention to this layout, because this is one of the ways that we provide that consistent user experience. So as I go down to my building and to my floor level, for instance, you'll notice that I get similar, we call them widgets or views of data within the system. But now these views are filtered for just the data that belongs to this particular floor. So I can see what particular equipment is serving areas within that floor. So kind of a standard experience based on that spaces framework. You will notice here that the graphics widget does not show up full screen, that we've positioned it so graphically I can see if there's any areas on the floor that are hot or cold based on our thermographic capabilities. But I can also see tabular views of data and be able to sort on the highest and lowest temperature or set points on data within that zone. So it's not just a graphics type of user interface and workflow. We're really trying to augment that graphical capability with other smart insights based on that space that you're located on. The custom dashboards feature that you're seeing right now was released in Metasys 9.0, so it is a new feature that really tailors the user experience based on space or equipment or type of device, mobile device or desktop device that you're viewing the data from. So let's walk through a start of shift. So let's imagine I'm just logging into the Metasys system. What I see a lot of operators do, based on their authorization level, of course, they'll go to the top level of the system that they have access to, and they'll go to this potential problem areas widget. And this is we call it an interactive report, but it's everything at that particular level of the space, in this case the campus, that's not normal. Anything an alarm, anything that's been overridden. A lot of times I'll see data within the BAS that's been overridden. In Metasys, that just means it's a BACnet priority level 8 that's been written to that value. But it's a good way to come in and understand, why did somebody override it? Are we wasting energy? You can export this at the start of the shift, export it at the end of the shift, and now you have kind of a punch list of, what was addressed or what issues were addressed throughout that particular shift. I've been logged into the system, or maybe I'm walking the floor, and I get a work order or I get a hot or a cold call for room 2. So I'm going to use the quick search feature at the top and type in room 2, and it tells me that it's main hospital, floor 1, room 2. Now you'll notice the spaces tree on the left changes to room 2. And we're getting what we call the equipment serving space widget. This is a custom dashboard we defined for this level of the spaces tree, because a room typically doesn't have a whole bunch of equipment, it's a few pieces of equipment. Right away it's telling you that VAV 110 is serving room 2 and you're on floor 1. So I don't have to make that relationship mentally between what equipment serving what space. I don't have to go through a network tree to figure out what equipment serving what space. I simply look at the room. I'm familiar with the room. Anybody that comes into a facility understands that space, and it gives me the data about the system that's supporting that room, but also data about, for instance, the air handler, which is AHU1, that's serving that VAV box, because the problem might not be with the terminal unit, it could be with the air handler. And in this case, our air handler's 1.7 degrees off a set point. So we could go in and change that from here if we feel that's what the problem is. So anywhere there's a link within a value, you can click that. And if you have access to do so, it'll allow you to adjust, override, or release, or other commands that you have access to as well within the system. So you can see here that let's say I wanted to adjust it or override it. One of the things that you saw with potential problem areas is there's a whole bunch of overrides on the site. So we added this temporary override feature where you can say, let's override this just for the next 4 or 6 hours, or maybe even over the weekend. After that override expires, the control returns back to whatever it was doing prior to this override command. The other thing I'd like to point out that we added specifically from customer feedback was this annotation feature. So when we're commanding, we heard, I'd like to be able to leave a reason as to why we make this change in the system. So I can leave the reason, whatever that might be. And when I make this adjustment in the system, it's stored in our database, and you can pull that up in a report later on to further understand and kind of communicate between operators of the system. I'll point out that it's not only HVAC equipment that we can integrate with Metasys, but we do a lot of integration. In this demo site, we have a lighting zone. In a similar way that we set up the HVAC, we have a lighting zone 6 that's affecting this particular room. I could drill into that lighting zone to see what other zones it's affecting, but anything that we can integrate over BACnet or one of the other standard protocols really can be integrated and put into this space-based interface in a very usable fashion, getting more out of your integrations that you may already have in your facilities. I'm going to now go to our floor again, because I think I've pinpointed that the problem is not with the VAV box or with the air handler, but maybe it's an issue with an adjacent room on that particular floor. So again, we do have thermographic capabilities, so I can tell based on the colors if it's in warning condition, low, higher warning, or lower, higher alarm. The front lobby in this case is in a low warning condition, so if I click on it, I can see the set points, what it's currently doing, and the limits real quickly without having to go through many different screens to get that information. You can command from graphics and things like that as well. But because we've augmented that graphic with other capabilities, I'm going to go ahead and click on all VAV boxes, which is the equipment represented on this particular floor. And now we get a tabular view of that data within the facility. You can quickly sort on zones, define your lowest and highest temperature, for instance, and be able to address those issues very quickly, again, because everything's commandable, and it will light up with the color based if it's overridden or in alarm or something like that. You can also export this, but it's a really good diagnostic tool that works nicely in conjunction with our graphical capabilities. The other kind of core tenet to the Metasys user interface is how we normalize data. So everything for every VAV box across this enterprise, the naming is now normalized with the Metasys user interface. So no matter what it used to be in the all items tree or the building network, I can pull that into a standard naming convention, and that's going to help, especially those newer users, learn the software much faster because they don't have to deal with the disparate naming conventions. All right, now that I've looked at some of the adjacent zones and I think that I may know what's going on, I'm going to go back to the air handler that's serving that floor to show you the equipment dashboard. So when we load the equipment dashboard, again, what you'll see is a custom dashboard applied that shows not only the operational graphic of that piece of equipment as pictured on the left, but it also shows supporting information that really helps the user diagnose the issue without having to go through multiple screens. So we're saving the operator a lot of time by placing this information on a cohesive equipment dashboard. There's a few different flavors. In this case, there's an AHU. This is a packaged AHU. We do have different graphical, photorealistic graphical capabilities. Here's our packaged rooftop unit. It's the same data coming in, just so you can kind of get a flavor of what it looks like. And for those custom air handlers out there, we can draw kind of custom ductwork in the system as well. So augmenting that graphic, there's a few different other views or widgets in the system that really make it powerful. You have the equipment activity widget. This is any data point coming from that air handler where a user may have made a change to it or it's been in an alarm in the past. So it's a timeline view. It really merges an audit trail or an audit viewer and an alarm viewer for this piece of equipment. So again, we're cutting down a lot on clicking between views and trying to correlate which points belong to which equipment. But I can see when things happen. Somebody released the operator override on this supply fan command 5 hours ago. I'll drill in further. It's Rebecca Jones. If you notice down here, there's a note on this cooling output override. That just means that there is a note left by the operator when they commanded that particular point. It can be filtered and exported as well, but it really helps the user diagnose problems that may have been happening by user changes and correlate that with alarm conditions and how that equipment's currently operating. The next item I'll go through is our trend viewer. So you'll notice here I've got the ability to pick which trends that I'd like to have viewable on the chart. So I'm going to change this. It smartly picks the order depending on how this was configured in the system. But let's change it to discharge air temperature, return air temperature, and mixed air temperature. If you want to see, we're using the mechanical system relationships here again, but you could look at, like the chilled water supply temperature as well, and we smartly identify that to the operator so they don't have to go back and forth again between different trend viewers for equipment that's affecting each other. So I've applied that chart, and I can see initially a day's view of data. I can see my discharge air temperature is kind of all over the place. So maybe this is the problem that we're experiencing. But let's go back in time and take a look at some of the capabilities of our trend viewer. So I'm going to go back 12 months. And what you've got now is a daily average view of per month of each of the data points. So you can look at that in a bar chart type of view. Or the new feature that we've added at Metasys 9 is the candlestick chart. And this is really a statistical chart. It tells you a visual way of your min, max, and average. So the bottom of the bar is your min for that time period, and the top of the bar is your max, and you can see the average is the little bar in the middle. So I can see that last September we had quite a big range. So I've identified an outlier in this equipment performance or energy meter. We see this used in a lot as well. I'm going to drill into that. And now the trend viewer gives us the ability to drill into just the 30 days in September. And it kind of tells me, oh, well, here's where the problem was. At that point, I could go ahead and export this, all the raw data, the CSV, or I could export it to PDF to be emailed or something like that, or to be sent to a tenant to prove out operation of this equipment as to whatever you're viewing. So I'm going to send this over to a PDF file. The system's going to go ahead and generate that data, and it exports me this PDF report. So you can see you have a really nice looking report that can be handed off and or filed away or sent via email. But it shows you the graphical view as well as tabular views of the data, min, max, average, for each of the data points that you're viewing on the chart. So I want you to also notice that we have a schedule that's governing this air handling unit, and that's shown on this dashboard as well. Now, this schedule is just for the air handler. It may be interlocked to some of the VAV boxes that are being served by this air handler. But in order to kind of really show you the full power of our schedule widget, I'm going to go to a higher level. So I'm going to go to our hospital or building level in our spaces tree, and I'm going to page over to our schedule widget. So on a space and or equipment dashboard, you can see schedules that are affecting that space or equipment. In this case, at the building level, I get a summary of all the schedules that are governing equipment in that particular facility. In this case, I can see at a glance when those schedules are going to be occupied, when they're unoccupied. The slashed indication on these events, that means that there has been an exception event programmed into this schedule for some reason. Potentially there's an event that's running longer on that particular day, or there's a room where there's an event that needs to be occupied or unoccupied that's different from the weekly schedule. One of the newer capabilities of Metasys is the user interface is being able to pick a date in the future. So this is today, but I want to see how the schedules are operating on Saturday to make sure they're set up right. So in this case, excuse me, I flipped over to Saturday. I see that these schedules are released, so they're doing equipment control, and the suite schedules are unoccupied. And the event that's happening on one of the rooms in floor 2 between 6 and 8 on Saturday is scheduled as well. So I think this is pretty good, but it's a good way to see that your schedules are set up correctly. I can filter, so if I just want to look at schedules governing the air handlers, I can filter out the zone schedules. And here are the 2 schedules that are governing air handlers, and this is the AHU1 schedule. So let's take a deeper dive into the AHU1 schedule. One thing I want to point out here with this scheduling view is that we've gone with a more industry or consumer standard scheduling approach. A lot easier to use if you're used to using scheduling applications like Microsoft Outlook or Google Calendar. You can see how the weekly schedule's set. You can also see those exception events for the schedule. You can change holiday dates. So if I wanted to, make today a holiday, we could go ahead and do that by just clicking, whatever date in here is active, and it will make this particular floor unoccupied. You can see which items are being scheduled. In this case, it's affecting floor 1, and this schedule is affecting air handler 1. And here's the actual data point within the BACnet building automation system that is being triggered when this schedule is active. So it's an occupancy schedule point within the Metasys system. So I've gone back to my schedule summary view. Now we're still at that main hospital level. We're looking at all the schedules that are governing that hospital. Let's say there is an event that I needed to create an exception for the entire building. So what I can do is select all of the schedules, and I can create an exception. You can do various types of exceptions like repeating, if you're familiar with that, or long running, but it'll ask you when should that exception occur, how long it should repeat. I could go through and tell it that to be occupied or unoccupied here. It gives you a preview of how that schedule will be affected afterwards, and I can go ahead and create an exception across all these different schedules in one operation. So I no longer have to go to each individual schedule when I'm doing an event for multiple schedules at the same time. I can also copy and paste weekly schedules. So if I saw that floor 1 had a weekly schedule where I set up the schedule on floor 1, and now I want to paste that to other floors, I can copy that weekly schedule and paste that to other floors. Again, I don't have to set up the schedules one by one anymore, which saves a lot of time. Also, there is an export capability, so if you want to audit how your schedules are set up, we could export those to Excel to get a better understanding of how everything is scheduled in your Excel viewer. Before I get into our graphics manager component, I just wanted to go through a couple other graphics examples. So I'm going to go to our central plant and show you graphics at a few different levels so you can kind of get a flavor of the operational aspect of our graphic. You can see we went with a very simplified approach to graphics, very clean. We want to make sure that the operator sees exactly what they need to see. If there's a alarm condition or if there's an operational issue. So we went with simplified graphics, but I want you to pay attention to the detail that we're providing with this graphics package. We've done a really fantastic job with our graphic artwork, and it really makes it easy for operators to understand issues and understand how that system is operating. Here's an example of a VAV box graphic with reheat. This graphic was designed to work with a custom dashboard. You could see that that custom dashboard again was applied here. Hot water system graphic. Now let's get into how you actually create and manage your graphics. Built within the Metasys user interface is a graphics managing component. So if you have access, you can get to the graphics manager. This is a built-in HTML5 editor. It doesn't require any additional software to be able to edit the graphics or create graphics. I'm going to go to my air handler. So again, it's a space-based graphics management system. Here's my air handler, and it's telling me, and you saw this before, we have 3 air handlers defined. I'm going to go ahead and edit that graphic and show you the graphics editing components. So on your right here are drawing tools, symbols, how you bind graphics to data, a layering component, and custom behaviors. So we have a full suite of graphical editing capabilities, a full suite of graphical symbols. Just to give you a couple examples, here's our air side, some of our air side air fans. Here's the packaged unit here that you see on the left. So let's say I had 2 filters in this air handler. So I just drop it in and it snaps into place. So you don't have to worry about visually aligning these symbols on the graphic artwork anymore. It just snaps into place, and you can see how easy it is to create these graphics. There's also an auto binding feature. So whatever's that point is named in your field controller, if that matches, there's no need to bind anymore. We automatically do that binding for you based on these normalized naming conventions that we have. A couple of the water side symbols just to give you a flavor of the level of detail that we have put into these symbols and artwork. Water sensors, valves, chillers, towers, all that type of stuff. We have electrical symbols, lighting symbols. That's all included with this built-in graphics editor, and that does come along with the Metasys user interface. Binding components, layering feature, and lastly, I want to touch on custom behaviors real briefly here. So let's say that you wanted to customize how your graphics look. Maybe you wanted to apply different animation, different fan, different set of symbols. There's this custom behavior feature here. And what you can do is you can now, at Metasys 9, add additional effects to those graphical symbols to further enhance your customization capability within our Metasys user interface graphics. Go back to the graphics manager, point out a couple other things. We have a full set of templates to get you started creating graphics, including air side, water side, so you could quickly get started creating and applying these graphics to your equipment and spaces. The other nice thing that saves a lot of time managing graphics is the master layer. So this is kind of like the background slide in PowerPoint. You could put outdoor air temperature and humidity or your customer logo on there, and it applies to all your graphics so that you only have to manage that background in one place. All right, let's go back into our space-based framework. We're now going to get into alarm management. We have a built-in alarm manager. We also have a full-screen alarm manager that's designed for operations rooms where they have a screen 24/7 that they're monitoring alarms that comes via a separate URL. Couple things to point out with our alarm manager. Again, it's space and equipment based, so the user can see which space or equipment that alarm is affecting. They no longer have to rely on the name of that point or the naming conventions. It's really simple, and it helps them prioritize which alarms to tackle first, in addition to our priority filters here on the right. You get a summary of how many total alarms are present. I'll go ahead and click in on a particular alarm here to show you the alarm details, but it'll tell you, what the limits were on that alarm, when that alarm occurred, the trigger value, what that data point's currently at, because it might not be in an alarm anymore, so that wouldn't be a problem. I'd acknowledge it and go on. But I want to point out the occurrences. So sometimes this happens, there's a sensor or a device that goes online and offline on the network that creates a lot of occurrences. We no longer create additional rows in the table. We roll everything up into a single roll that can be acknowledged or discarded in one click, as well as annotated on. You'll notice here that there's a lot of unreliables in the system. There was somebody else within our sales demo that did a bulk command and actually caused this issue earlier this morning. So this is typical of a network outage as well if you have a network device or devices that go offline. I can use my filtering capability by space or equipment, so I could filter on alarms just from the medical center, for instance. But in this case, I'm going to filter on unreliables because I want to handle those. You can filter by status or priority as well. Very, very simple, easy filtering. Now I'm showing only my unreliables. I'm going to select all of them, and I can, in this case, they're already acknowledged, so I'm going to just get rid of these. We can bulk discard these if you have access. So in a couple of clicks, I've just handled my alarms and really have cleaned up the alarm conditions to make the most prevalent alarms important again. With these types of features in our alarm manager, I really feel it's industry leading. All right, our alarm management capabilities, then we'll go on to the building network. So on the left here, you'll see two tabs, our spaces and our network tab. So if you have access to the network tab, you could click through that network tab. Now, for those users that are familiar with Site Management Portal, this is similar to what you'll see with the All Items tree. So here's the NAE, the focus, diagnostic, and network views. So these are kind of those engineering views of the building automation system. You can make adjustments to these objects within the system. Anything that's underlined can be adjusted and modified within this interface. Some diagnostic information to understand how your network is operating. And again, because we're a space and equipment-based interface, we're actually telling the user what part of the facility this network engine is responsible for. So it is the main hospital, parking lot, basement, and it has floors 1 and 2. That's really important, especially for those newer users, to understand what they're affecting in the system if they make adjustments to this network automation engine. If I go down further and I go to a field controller, I'll click on an air handler. I want you to notice that we now show the summary view first. So before we showed the details, focus, diagnostic, network. We show the summary now, and this is going to be similar to your Site Management Portal interface. So for those users that are used to using the Site Management Portal interface, they'll feel very comfortable utilizing the building network feature of the Metasys user interface. And I do want to add that this feature comes along with Metasys 9.0. It does not require any configuration. So if you are one of our customers that are at a previous release of Metasys, you can upgrade to 9.0, begin taking advantage of the building network feature, our alarm management feature, and then our search and reporting feature, which is next. So I'm going to go and create an audit report on floor 1, all VAV boxes, on zone temperatures, because I want to see who's making changes to those set points. We'll search, and now the software has gone out and found me all zone temperatures on VAV boxes that are serving some area of floor 1. I can sort in here and command and search for other things, but I could also command. If we wanted to do a bulk command, we could change that to 74 to restore order, and again, leaving that annotation. Or I can create a report. So start date and time, we'll go back to last Friday. I'm going to pick an audit report. You could do an alarm, activity, or trend report as well. And I'm going to select the PDF export. And right now it's going out to our audit database and correlating that with these data points on floor 1 on VAV boxes, and it's going to look to see if any user changes were made. Okay, you can see that there were a few user changes made to these data points. It was a bulk adjustment made from 75 degrees down to 72 degrees, and here are the equipment and space that this affects. So again, a really nice way to be able to store and save these reports, potentially email them to others to further report and figure out what's going on within your facility. Lastly, I'll go through our spaces authorization. So if you have access, there's a user authorization menu. And on the left side, it asks you to select a user. So I'm going to go to myself. You can see we're presented with the spaces tree here. So this is really useful, especially if you have tenant users within your facility where you don't want certain users to have access to the entire site. So I can go in and deny access to all of the campus and just give access to a few floors of a building potentially, or in this case, the administration building. Once this is set up, that user no longer can see equipment, view reports, or anything like that from anything else other than the administration building of this campus. So a really good way to control authorization and prevent unauthorized access to areas where folks shouldn't be. All right, to kind of sum this up, what we've done with the Metasys user interface is focused really on user experience, on reducing the time on task, getting in, understanding the issue, solving the problem as quickly as possible. We've done that by putting data on cohesive dashboards, so you don't have to go through a bunch of graphics and click through the system, in a way that is mobile optimized for tablet devices, phones, as well as desktop devices, that does not require the use of installable software. So it's a web browser-based implementation. Really easy to use. We've been getting a lot of great positive feedback on it. And I guess at this point, let's go ahead and conclude the demo and switch it over to our Q&A section.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ryan. That was really informative. Thanks a lot. I know there's a lot of really great features that are new to 9.0, as well as some features that have been included in Metasys starting at that 7.0 release that you mentioned 4 years ago. So we've already got a couple of really great questions coming in, but at this time I'll just remind everyone we do still have about 10 to 15 minutes left, so you can continue to submit your questions via the chat or the Q&A panel at any point. And if for whatever reason you have a question at the end that we're not able to get to, we'll make sure we get that addressed in a Q&A document that we send out with the recorded version shortly after today's event. So with that, Ryan, our first question is regarding the notes on commanding. Is it possible to set up notifications to remind whomever for something that has been overridden and set to never expire?
Right now, that is not a capability of the Metasys system, but that's a really good piece of feedback that I think we could use on our roadmap.
Okay. And, along with that, I know we get a lot of folks asking, can you force users to have to leave notes when they make a change or they override a point? Is that available in Metasys today?
That feature of being able to force somebody is not available in Metasys today, but it is on the product backlog. Now, keep in mind that potential problem areas report that I showed you, that really brings out all the overrides on the system. So it's a lot easier to see what has been overridden in the system and correct and restore order at this release of Metasys.
Okay. And Ryan, maybe you can talk a little bit about what it takes to configure the Metasys user interface for an existing campus and their existing equipment.
Sure. We have tool sets built within our system configuration tools that will automatically discover the data. There's a spreadsheet, drag and drop, so you can create your spaces off of a spreadsheet and drag those into our system. And with the discovery feature and automatically set that up. So it's not too bad, but you do have to take some thought in how you want to present your spaces to your set of users.
Okay. Do Metasys user interface users count against available seats for a customer site? So, example, if you have 10 users as part of your ADX or your ADS, are you limited to a total of 10 users between the Metasys user interface and the site management portal at a time?
Yes, you're correct. So there's a pool. So if it's like a 10 user license ADX, you could have 5 users logged into Metasys UI and 5 users logged into our engineering workstation.
Okay. And then somebody's asking for some of the reporting capabilities that you showed earlier. Could a user modify a report manually before they generate the PDF? And would they need any sort of additional software to be able to do that?
Yeah, modifying our PDF reports is not a capability of Metasys today. We do offer the Excel report, so you could export all the raw data to Excel and build your own report off of that using industry standard tools.
Okay. And is multiple panel viewing possible?
Yeah, I think that question's probably regarding how our site management portal works when you can drag various objects into different views. We do support custom dashboards as a standard user experience in the system. So we do have multiple views that we built from a cohesive standpoint for a piece of equipment or space. But right now it is not a capability where you can change on the fly widgets around or drag different things onto the screen.
Okay, thank you. And this question is one that we get rather frequently. Do you need a server? I mentioned earlier an ADX or an ADS. Do you need a server to get the Metasys user interface?
A server is required to be able to take advantage of the Metasys user interface. There is a promotion going on right now, so I would reach out to your Metasys or Johnson Controls rather branch representative for Metasys and find out more about those promotional offers that are going on.
Okay, great. Just kind of scrolling through the questions here. Let's see. Okay. Ryan, you mentioned some of the browsers at the very beginning of the demo that could be used to use and operate and view Metasys user interface. Is there a preferred or a recommended browser that you personally like to use or would recommend to users?
The recommended browser is Google Chrome. That has shown the best performance during our software testing.
Okay. Great. Well, I think those are all of the questions that I've received so far. So we'll go ahead and leave the webinar open for just a couple of minutes to get any questions coming in that we could possibly answer during or will answer during our follow-up Q&A. So Ryan, if you want to go ahead and move to the next slide here. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I know everyone's got very busy schedules, so we really appreciate you taking the time to watch today's demo. Just a final reminder that a recorded version of today's session will be made available to you shortly after today's event, as well as that Q&A document that I mentioned. And of course, if you'd like to see or learn anything more about Metasys 9.0, we invite you to visit the URL that you see posted to the screen right now. And as Ryan mentioned, certainly invite you to work with your Johnson Controls representatives about some of those offers that you may qualify for in order to make upgrading or purchasing Metasys 9.0 easy and cost effective. So like I said, we'll leave the webinar open for just a couple more minutes, and thank you so much again.
Thank you.